Well, here we are in 2019 with another remake of an 80s film. This time it's Pet Sematary, originally released as a novel from Stephen King in 1983, then adapted into a film in 1989, which then spawned a sequel which no one really talks about except for the fact Clancy Brown is a heck of a character in it. Anyways, the novel received critical acclaim, and when talks of the film were on the rise, they made the film in 1989 and it got some positive reception, but not as much as they would have liked. While the 1989 version of the film, directed by Mary Lambert, has some definite standout moments and something pretty close to King's novel, the question is, did we need to see a remake? The answer is maybe, kinda, sorta. Here I'll explain. Now for the 2019 film. Spoilers ahead, by the way. Everything starts to play out like the novel, sort of. However, there is a huge emphasis on Ellie, which you should all take note of this. I will comment on the style of the film compared to the 1989 version, which there is a very huge difference here. The film's dark atmospheric tone that incorporates a brightness of colour when everything is fine, and then in a blink of an eye can turn into a dark, tense moment, but you can sort of know what's going to happen. It's pretty predictable, it doesn't really work really well. I can give some credit to the cinematography, but it's nothing that's going to score an Emmy. The use of fog and shadows to show how eerie the burial ground is may be a little dated, but hey, it worked for the most part. The original version does have that contrast, but not as effectively as you may have wanted. That's really it when it comes to the look of the film. Generic houses, not a lot to see except house, road, pet cemetery, and Judd. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the characters of the film. Let's start with the man of the house, Lewis Creed, played by Jason Clarke. From Dale Midkiff's portrayal to Clarke's portrayal, I don't really see a difference. I mean, he did show true emotion on the screen in some areas, but altogether I feel his character was just dumbed down, asking, "What's that? Oh, what's over there?" Just like Midkiff's portrayal. It's hard to really sum up who did it better. Dale actually hit his head on a drawer in one of the scenes of the 1989 version, so I'll give him credit for that. Otherwise, it's a bit of a deal breaker for me that he is just a blank slate of a character for majority of the film. So let's move on to Rachel, played by Amy Seimetz. I hope I got her name correct. She was a much better character this time around than the original. She does show true flashbacks of the incident with Zelda and how much it has affected her over the years, which, if we are speaking of Zelda, Zelda is much more gruesome looking this time around, but doesn't give off the first look we had of the original Zelda in 1989. That look of the character is etched into my head and maybe in a lot of other people's heads as well. With this take on it, it provides a more realistic look, but not more of a scarier look. Also, another change that was implemented was that Rachel's parents looked like they had a problem with Lewis, but once again, this was largely ignored and the dad sort of gives a "you might have fucked up" look to Lewis when they are burying Ellie. Otherwise, Rachel shows to be an emotional character due to what traumatized her as a child and trying to move on with her family. However, I would have appreciated a bit more screen time for her. It feels like she got pushed in the background for a lot of the movie, well, up until the very end of the film where she's shown quite a lot. As for Judd, unfortunately, he is treated like a bit of an evil character for showing Lewis the burial ground. However, he is apologetic, and from the first point he met Ellie, had a bit of a connection with her and just wanted the best for her. However, after a few scenes here and there, we really don't see him as a supporting character. And even for Lewis just downright spikes Judd's drink so he can go dig up Ellie and take her out to the burial ground so then he wouldn't get a lecture from Judd. It's also John Lithgow's performance. To me, it felt pretty dull. I get that we're trying to change things up, but from Fred Gwynn's portrayal of a happy-go-lucky but troubled fellow to a person who really doesn't feel like it's worth living, except for looking out his back door and smoking a couple of cigarettes, and at the birthday party, he seemed like he was having the goddamn time of his life. He just wasn't a very great character to really care about for the majority of the film. Unlike in the original 89 version, I had more time for Judd, and the comedic elements that Fred was able to throw into it was even better. And now, the shining star in the film was the young actress who played Ellie, which I believe her name is pronounced Jette Lawrence. She gave it her absolute all, from the start of the film as an intrigued and innocent little girl and then to a dead, scalpel, tendon, slicing, menacing, manipulating demon was an absolute sigh of relief to see that change. And she was also able to keep her left eye slightly closed than the other throughout the rest of the film. She kept her character going strong, and for that, she is the highlight of the film. The Ellie arc was good, and she showed a malevolent amount of evil, far more than what was shown in the 1989 version. A welcome change was good, having Ellie as the one that gets struck by the truck instead of Gage, but really, watching the film, there were a few scenes with Gage, and you knew nothing was going to happen to him anyways. Pascal's character, played by Obsa Ahmed, appears more gruesome in this version, but he isn't around for too long. With only a couple of scenes, he really doesn't try and stop anyone from doing anything up in the burial ground. He doesn't try and delay anything, he just sort of stands there and goes, well, nothing I can do, I'm dead. There is a very minor subplot where Gage is getting signs from Pascal, but the kid's like 3, what else is he going to say other than what he says in the film, Pascal? Which prompts Rachel to leave from her parents' house to go back to Ludlow to check on Lewis because something isn't right, which feels thrown in at the last minute. And with the injury sustained to Pascal, we don't really get to see a lot of it. We only get to see it from a few angles here and there, unlike the original film, but we get to see more than what we should, so I think that should satisfy all you gore addicts out there. And pretty much with what Pascal says in the film, he has said in the 1989 version of the film, the same quotes, and he basically acts the same way in this film, except he's just not around as long and doesn't provide that silly comedic relief that we've seen with the older Pascal. Which I guess this film was trying to be a lot more serious, and I can understand that, but at the same time repeating what the old character had said and then just putting into the new character. There wasn't a lot changed. They could have done a little bit more with the character, because he is more of a sort of presence to stop Lewis from doing anything, but as I said, he doesn't really try and do anything, he doesn't really intervene, it just sort of stands there and that's about it. And of course, I forgot about Church, one of the most important characters of the film. He's played by several adorable cats, which done their absolute best in the film, and yeah, shout outs to all of them. Good little kitties. Now, focusing on certain aspects of the film that I may agree with and disagree with. Remember, these are all my opinions, I've basically just left the cinema with it all still lingering around in my head, so if you don't agree with it, that's alright. But let's talk about the sound of the film. There's large bangs, screams, a couple of crickets, some ambience here and there, but that's about it. But wait, there's the jump scares, which in this film were just so cheap, and there are plenty of them too. You knew they were coming. Film goes silent, camera goes slow, character is looking around not knowing what is going on, and bam, jump scare. I mean, Rachel hears noises coming from the attic and is led to open their bathroom cabinet to find a dumbwaiter inside. This is from her past with the whole Zelda got crushed in the dumbwaiter because Rachel didn't want to take the food up to her, yada yada. Anyways, and decides to stick her head in to see Zelda plummet towards the screen, screaming. Yeah, cheap, I know. And that goes with a lot of the other quick scares they threw in, the first one being the truck driving by the house. It shook the cinema I was in. The characters just sort of stare at it and go, and just don't worry about it at all. Also, Pet Sematary by the Ramones, which was featured in the credits of the original film, was featured in the credits of this film, but except it was done by some band who I can't really remember, and it was quite terrible, and I pretty much got out of the theatre once I knew there was no post-credit scene. So in regards to what really causes all this to happen, we got a bit of a backstory showing that the Wendigo is in fact the one behind all of the chaos. Judd provides Lewis a book which has the Wendigo written in it, as well as the pattern seen on a tree earlier in the film. But Lewis basically just ignores it while we get to see a small snippet of a newspaper showing the Timmy Bateman story, which we don't get to see any flashbacks to either. There's also mention of Judd's wife, once, early in the film. When Ellie's attacking Judd later in the film, Ellie appears as Norma to Judd. If you guys didn't pay attention to that 15-second scene earlier in the film, you might have went, what the fuck is going on here? Yeah, she was in the novel, but wasn't in the 1989 version, so it's a blink and you will miss moment. Also, the reveal of Ellie after the rear of the truck collects her. I thought she would have been pretty messed up, but nope. Honestly, if one of those was coming at you at full speed, I mean, it was going pretty fast in the movie, it's not going to just bump her head and push her into the ditch. That thing was coming for her in the middle of the road, man. A bit of, that just really didn't happen there, did it moment. It wasn't as emotional as what happened to Gage in the original film. It was just sort of tacked on. I mean, you knew it was coming, but I honestly thought that she was going to be completely twisted and torn to pieces, but we obviously don't get to see any of it, but yeah, it just doesn't seem realistic at all. And to elaborate a little bit further, the rear of the truck is actually sliding along the ground, and it actually slides quite far towards where Ellie is standing, and then when we cut to Ellie just lying in the ditch, it's basically where the truck has stopped. So she would have had time to sort of jump out of the way, I guess, but obviously it needed to happen, so it happened that way. That's really it to cover about the film, isn't it? Oh wait, we have the ending. Oh god. I went in there with an open mind and came out going, but why? There's no reference to the fact that maybe burying the dead quicker might make them different like in the novel and the 1989 version. It's just, they are dead, Barry, and then in a few minutes they're knocking on the front door wanting some coffee, and just like that, good as new. Also, I forgot to mention the scene in which Lewis is cleaning Ellie up after she comes home and finds staples in her head. That was a little eerie. Ugh. Anyways, we all knew that Ellie was going to kill Rachel, just like Gage did in the original. It had to happen. Lewis gets knocked out by a small wooden chair while in the middle of trying to save Rachel when she gets stabbed multiple times by Ellie, which she says, "Don't bury me there." Fair enough at this point. Oh, sorry, did I mention that Lewis does check on Judd? He's dead, but there goes that character. Anyways, once Lewis is knocked out, Ellie, however, has sufficient time to literally drag Rachel from the house, downstairs, and all the way to the pet cemetery, and she's already resurrected by the time Lewis gets there. It's sort of like how Gage could hang Rachel from Judd's ceiling by himself in the 1989 version. Supernatural, y'all. Lewis then gets to the pet cemetery and fights with Ellie, and then he gets impaled in the chest by Rachel, who has been resurrected, and it only feels like a few minutes has gone by, but anyways. And he gets dragged, presumably to the burial ground, to be buried and resurrected. Wait, well, what about Gage? He's in the car, safe and sound. Then here comes the family, church included, to the car to come kill Gage, as Judd's house burns in the background, which we see at the start of the film. Why did we have to see that at the beginning, when we all know the logistic of the story? But anyways, the super fast resurrected Lewis and crew go towards Gage in the car, and that's the end of the film. It just left me going, yeah, okay, fair enough, but why? Like, the resurrection is so fast in this, whereas in the novel, it took at least 12 hours or so. This looks like it takes 5 minutes. Then again, the walk back from the burial ground, which also, how the fuck did Ellie drag Rachel up all those stairs and the dead wall? Supernatural. I wanted to know sort of what happened. Did the local authorities get there and see what happened, or we just got the ending and we have to agree with it? I believe there is an alternate ending that should be on the Blu-ray releases. However, if the production have changed things up so much, why not add a little aftermath and show that maybe it will keep going? The abrupt end is just a bit of a disappointment to me. So much more could have been done with it. I like how the filmmakers may be thinking about a prequel since they admitted to not showing what happened before the Creeds got there, like the Bateman story, etc. It might be okay, but otherwise, maybe just leave it be just for now. While most of the film was predictable, and if you had seen any of the promotional material, then you knew what was coming. It was okay at best. I'd like to go back to the 1989 version and go through that again just to process everything, considering that's sort of a cult classic by now. This film achieves some highs but effectively keeps tugging at things to try to keep the story going. And even if you had read the original novel and not seen the 1989 version, you probably knew what was coming anyways. The creepy kids in the masks burying their pets, which was highlighted in the trailer, isn't touched upon after the only scene you see of them, which was a disappointment. I thought that maybe they had something more to do with the plot, but not really, it's just something that has happened for years, according to the film. The character developments were subpar, as I mentioned. However, as I said, round of applause to Jede Lawrence, who was an absolute trooper in this film to be able to play someone so innocent and then someone so evil. She is a saving grace for this movie, and to be fairly honest, if you didn't see any of the promotional material, you would have been able to guess that Ellie was the one to be killed off and brought back, as Gage is in the film very little. The film certainly doesn't keep you on the edge of your seat because it's not meant to. However, when you know that a loud jump scare is approaching, you might want to hold on because they are really, really loud. Overall, I'd give this film about a 3 out of 5. It wasn't a bad movie, but it felt like just a remaster of the 1989 version with a lot of plot elements changed and thrown around. I like change, but sometimes originals are better. Let me know what you thought of this film down below. It would be interesting to see how other people view this film. Until next time, take care.